Dr. Elena Martinez stepped off the transport ship and onto the crystal platform of Zephyrius 7. The air shimmered around her like liquid silver, and towers of pure light stretched toward 3 different colored suns. She had never seen anything like this place before, but she didn't have time to be amazed. Back on Earth, millions of people were dying from a terrible sickness, and the medicine they needed could only be found here. Elena was part of a group of 5 humans who had traveled across the galaxy to meet with the alien king. The others were diplomats, people whose job was to make deals and agreements. But Elena was different. She was a doctor who had spent her whole life studying diseases and finding ways to cure them. She had volunteered for this mission because she knew how desperate things had become back home. The Crystal Palace rose before them like a mountain made of diamonds. Guards with skin that looked like living gemstones led them through hallways that seemed to go on forever. Everything here was perfect to perfect. The walls curved in impossible ways, and the ceiling showed images of distant stars that moved like they were alive. Finally, they reached the throne room. It was huge, bigger than any building Elena had ever seen. At the far end sat King Vorthik on a throne made of what looked like frozen lightning. He was at least 12 feet tall, with skin that shifted between blue and silver. His eyes glowed like small suns, and when he spoke, his voice sounded like music mixed with thunder. The king looked down at the small group of humans like they were insects that had wandered into his palace. Elena could feel her heart beating fast, but she tried to stay calm. Too much depended on this meeting. Ambassador Chen, the leader of their group, stepped forward and began the formal greeting. He spoke about friendship between worlds and mutual cooperation. Elena had heard these same words in practice sessions during their long journey here. Everything was going according to plan until the king started laughing. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh someone makes when they think something is ridiculous. King Vorthik waved his hand, and the ambassador stopped talking. "You humans," the king said, his voice echoing through the vast room. "You come here begging for medicine like children asking for candy. Do you know how many civilizations have knelt before this throne? Do you know how long my people have ruled the stars while yours were still crawling in mud?" Elena felt her face get hot with anger, but she forced herself to stay quiet. The ambassador tried to continue with the planned speech about trade agreements and partnerships, but the king wasn't interested. He kept talking about how advanced his civilization was and how primitive humans seemed to him. "Your people are dying," King Vorthik said with no emotion in his voice. "That is unfortunate. But why should the mighty Zephyrian Empire concern itself with the problems of such a young and weak species?" The other humans in the group looked worried. Elena could see their carefully prepared negotiation falling apart before their eyes. They had traveled so far and risked so much, and now it seemed like they would return to Earth empty-handed. That's when Elena noticed something the others had missed. At the side of the throne room, partly hidden in the shadows, was another figure. It was clearly the king's daughter. Elena could see the family resemblance in the facial features and the way she carried herself. But something was wrong. The princess looked sick, very sick. While King Vorthik continued his speech about Zephyrian superiority, Elena studied the princess more carefully. Her skin, which should have been bright and glowing like her father's, kept fading in and out, like a television with bad reception. Sometimes she seemed solid. Sometimes Elena could see right through her. The princess was obviously in pain, though she was trying to hide it. Elena had seen many sick people in her career as a doctor, and she recognized the signs of someone who was suffering from a condition that no one could cure. An idea began to form in her mind. It was crazy, dangerous, and could get her in terrible trouble. But it might be their only chance. Before she could change her mind, Elena stepped forward. The sound of her footsteps on the crystal floor made everyone turn to look at her. Ambassador Chen's eyes went wide with worry. This wasn't part of their plan. "Your Majesty," Elena said, her voice clear and strong despite her nervousness. "I can see that your daughter is sick." The throne room went completely silent. The king's glowing eyes focused on Elena like laser beams. She could feel the danger in that look, but she kept talking. I'm a doctor. I've spent my whole life studying diseases and finding cures. I've seen thousands of patients, and I've learned to recognize the signs of different illnesses. Elena took a breath and made her bold proposal. I think I can help your daughter. I think I can cure her. King Vorthix stood up from his throne, even from far away. Elena could feel the power radiating from him. When he spoke, his voice was cold enough to freeze water. Many healers have tried to cure Princess Lyrale. The greatest minds in our empire have studied her condition for years. What makes you think a primitive human could succeed where our advanced science has failed? Elena's heart was pounding, but she had committed herself now, because sometimes being different is an advantage. Sometimes the answer comes from looking at a problem in a completely new way. The king stared at her for what felt like forever. Then, slowly, he began to smile. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who was about to enjoy watching someone else fail. Very well, little human doctor, he said. I will make you a deal. If you can cure my daughter when our best healers could not, I will give you all the medicine your world needs. More than that, I will give you Princess Lyrale's hand in marriage, and make you part of our royal family. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. Marriage to the princess? That wasn't what she had expected. But before she could respond, the king continued. But if you fail, his voice became dangerous, then you and all your companions will become my personal servants for the rest of your lives. You will never see your home world again. The other humans started protesting immediately. Ambassador Chen stepped forward, trying to say that Elena didn't have the authority to make such an agreement. But Elena held up her hand to stop them. She looked around the throne room at the dying princess who reminded her of all the patience she had lost over the years, at her fellow humans who were depending on her, and at the arrogant king who was so sure he couldn't lose. Elena thought about all the people back on Earth who were suffering and dying while she stood here. I accept your challenge, she said. King Vorthix's laughter filled the throne room. He had never imagined that a human would be brave enough or foolish enough to accept such terms. In his mind, he had already won. Soon he would have 5 human servants to add to his collection, and he could get back to more important matters. But as Elena looked at Princess Lyrale, she saw something in the young woman's eyes that gave her hope. Despite her illness, despite the pain she was obviously feeling, there was intelligence there. And maybe, just maybe, there was also gratitude that someone was finally willing to try something different. The deal was made. Elena had 3 days to cure a princess that the most advanced medical minds in the galaxy couldn't help. If she succeeded, she would save millions of lives on Earth. If she failed, she would lose her freedom forever. As the guards led them to their quarters, Elena wondered if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. But then she remembered the faces of the children in the Earth hospitals, and she knew she had made the only choice she could live with. The real work was about to begin. Elena woke up the next morning in a room that looked like it was carved from a single giant crystal. The walls glowed softly with their own light, and when she touched them, they felt warm like living skin. She had barely slept, thinking about the impossible task ahead of her. A Zephyrian guard with silver skin came to escort her to the royal medical chambers. As they walked through the palace corridors, Elena noticed other aliens stopping to stare at her. Word had spread quickly about the human doctor who had dared to challenge their king. Some looked curious, others seemed amused, but most looked at her like she was already a failure. The medical chambers were unlike anything Elena had ever seen. The room was filled with machines that hummed with energy, their surfaces covered in symbols that shifted and changed like living writing. Healing crystals floated in the air, casting rainbow patterns on the walls. In the center of it all was a bed made of what looked like liquid light, and on that bed lay Princess Lyrale. Elena's breath caught in her throat. The princess was beautiful, but in a heartbreaking way. Her body kept fading in and out like a ghost, sometimes solid, sometimes transparent. Elena could see the pain in her face. Even though she appeared to be sleeping, it was clear that this young woman had been suffering for a very long time. 3 Zephyrian healers stood round the bed, their hands glowing with healing energy. They looked exhausted. like they had been working without rest for days. When they saw Elena enter, they stepped back with expressions of doubt and frustration. "This is Princess Lyrale," said the head healer, his voice filled with sadness. "For 2 years. She has been caught between our world and another dimension. Sometimes she is here with us. Sometimes she disappears completely. The pain never stops." For her, Elena moved closer to the bed, her medical training taking over. She had seen many strange diseases in her career, but nothing like this. "What have you tried so far?" she asked. The healers began explaining all the treatments they had attempted. They had used every piece of advanced technology in their empire. They had brought in experts from across the galaxy. They had tried ancient remedies and cutting-edge science. Nothing had worked. If anything, the princess seemed to be getting worse. "Our minds work in patterns," explained one of the healers. "Everything in our civilization follows perfect order and logic, but this sickness doesn't follow any rules we understand. It's chaotic, unpredictable, almost like it's alive," Elena finished. Understanding beginning to dawn on her. She spent the next several hours studying every piece of information the healers had gathered. The more she learned, the more convinced she became that the Zephyrians had been approaching the problem in the wrong way. They kept trying to impose order on something that was fundamentally chaotic. Elena knew that human brains were different from Zephyrian brains, where aliens thought in straight lines and perfect patterns. Humans were messy and unpredictable. Her teachers in medical school had always said this was a weakness, but Elena was beginning to wonder if it might actually be a strength. Late that night, when the palace was quiet and the healers had gone to rest, Elena remained alone with Princess Lyrale. She pulled up a chair next to the glowing bed and began to talk, even though she wasn't sure if the princess could hear her. "My name is Elena," she said softly. "I'm from a planet called Earth, and I'm here to try to help you. I know you're in pain, and I know you've been sick for a long time, but I want you to know that I'm not going to give up on you." As she spoke, something amazing happened. Princess Lyrale's eyes opened, and for just a moment, she became completely solid. She looked directly at Elena, and there was recognition there, and hope. You're the human doctor," the princess whispered, her voice barely audible. "I heard what you said to my father. Everyone thinks you're crazy for trying to help me." Elena smiled. "Maybe I'm crazy, but sometimes crazy ideas are the ones that work." Princess Lyrale tried to sit up, but the effort made her fade again until Elena could barely see her. "The healers don't understand," she said, her voice becoming distant. "This isn't just a sickness. It's like I'm being pulled between two worlds, and I can't find my way back to either one." Elena leaned closer. "What do you see when you're in the other dimension?" "Darkness mostly, but sometimes I can see our world from the outside, like I'm floating above it. I can see my father in his throne room, making decisions about the empire. I can see the people of our kingdom going about their lives, but I can't touch anything or talk to anyone. I'm like a ghost watching life happen without me." Elena's mind was racing. This wasn't just a medical condition. It was like the princess was stuck between realities. And if that was true, then maybe the solution wasn't to cure her in the traditional sense. Maybe it was to help her find her way home. "Lyrale," Elena said, using the princess's name for the first time, "I have an idea, but it's going to require you to trust me completely. What I'm thinking of trying has never been done before. It could be dangerous." The princess became solid again, looking directly into Elena's eyes. "I've been living in pain for 2 years. If there's even a small chance you can help me, I'm willing to try anything." Elena nodded. "Then we're going to need to work together. Your healers have been trying to fix you using their technology and their way of thinking. But what if we try something different? What if we use the way human minds work, chaotic and unpredictable, to help guide you back to where you belong?" Princess Lyrale's eyes widened with something Elena hadn't seen there before, real hope. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Elena took a deep breath. "First, I need to understand exactly what's happening to you, and to do that, I'm going to have to find a way to connect my mind to yours." The princess looked scared but determined. Is that possible? Elena looked around at all the advanced alien technology surrounding them. I don't know, she admitted, but I think we're about to find out. As Elena began planning her unprecedented treatment, she had no idea that King Vorthok was watching from the shadows, his expression growing more worried by the hour. For the first time since making his arrogant bargain, the alien king was beginning to realize that he might actually lose. The next morning, Elena was back in the medical chambers. Before the sun crystals began glowing, she had spent most of the night thinking about how to connect her mind to Princess Lirale's. The Zephyrian healers had machines that could read brain patterns, but Elena needed something more. She needed a way to actually share thoughts and experiences. When the head healer arrived, Elena was already studying the bio-neural interface machines. These devices were designed to monitor the princess's condition, but Elena thought they might be able to do much more. I need you to modify this equipment, Elena said, pointing to the largest machine. Instead of just reading brain patterns, I needed to create a bridge between two minds. The healer's crystalline features showed shock. That's impossible. Such a connection has never been attempted between our species and yours. The differences in our neural structures could cause permanent damage to both minds. Elena looked at Princess Lirale, who was lying motionless on the bed, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. She's dying anyway, isn't she? Without treatment, how long does she have? The healer's silence was answer enough. Then we don't have anything to lose, Elena said firmly. Please, just help me try. It took several hours to modify the equipment. Elena had to explain human brain structure to the healers, while learning about Zephyrian neural patterns herself. It was like trying to build a bridge between two completely different worlds, which Elena realized was exactly what they were doing. When Princess Lirale woke up that afternoon, Elena explained what they were going to attempt. I'm going to link my mind with yours, she said. If this works, I should be able to experience what you're experiencing when you slip between dimensions. Maybe I can help guide you back. And if it doesn't work, the princess asked. Elena was honest, then we might both get lost between worlds. Princess Lirale was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out with a hand that was barely solid and touched Elena's arm. You're risking everything to help me. Why? You barely know me. Elena thought about all the patients she had treated over the years, all the people she had been unable to save. Because that's what doctors do, she said simply. We try to heal people even when it seems impossible. The neural connection process began at sunset. Elena lay on a bed next to the princess while the modified machines hummed around them. Thin beams of light connected their heads as the bio-neural interface came online. At first, Elena felt nothing. Then, slowly, she began to sense another presence in her mind. It was like hearing a whisper in a crowded room at first, but gradually the whisper became clearer. Elena could feel Princess Lirale's thoughts, her memories, her emotions. The experience was overwhelming, like trying to hold an ocean in a teacup. Then something extraordinary happened. The world around Elena began to fade, and she found herself floating in a space that wasn't quite darkness and wasn't quite light. She could see the medical chamber below her, but it looked distant and unreal. This was the space between dimensions, where Princess Lirale had been trapped. Elena, the princess's voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. Are you here with me? I'm here. Neither of them noticed King Vorthok watching from the doorway, his expression a mixture of amazement and growing concern. His daughter was cured, which meant he had lost his bargain. But worse than that, he could see the connection between the human doctor and his daughter. This wasn't just about medicine anymore. It was about something much more powerful and much more dangerous to his plans. King Vorthok stood in his private chambers that night, staring out at the 3 moons of Zephyrius 7. For over 1,000 years, he had ruled this empire with absolute authority. His word was law, and his decisions shaped the fate of billions of beings across the galaxy. But now, for the first time in his long life, he found himself in a situation he couldn't control. The problem wasn't just that he had lost the bargain. Kings could find ways around uncomfortable agreements if they were clever enough. The real Problem was his daughter. In the few hours since her cure, Princess Lyrale had changed in ways that went far beyond her physical healing. A soft knock on his chamber door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he commanded. Princess Lyrale walked in, and King Vorthik was struck by how different she looked. Her skin glowed with vitality. Her movements were strong and confident, and there was something new in her eyes, a spark of independence he had never seen before. "Father," she said, bowing respectfully but not as deeply as she used to, "I wanted to thank you for allowing Elena to treat me. I know it couldn't have been an easy decision." King Vorthik studied his daughter carefully. "You seem different. Lyrale, the treatment has changed you in more ways than just the physical." The princess smiled, and there was a warmth in it that reminded the king of her mother, who had died when Lyrale was young. "The experience of being cured opened my eyes to many things, Father. I've spent 2 years watching our empire from the dimensional space, seeing things from the outside. I've learned about other worlds, other ways of thinking. And what have you concluded from these observations?" The king asked, though he suspected he wouldn't like the answer. "I've concluded that our empire is strong, but it could be stronger. We've spent so long believing that our way is the only way, that we've stopped learning and growing." Elena showed me that sometimes the best solutions come from the most unexpected places. King Vorthik felt a chill run through him. This was exactly what he had feared. "Lyrale, you must understand that this human doctor has a very limited perspective. She knows nothing of ruling an empire or maintaining order across the galaxy." But Princess Lyrale shook her head. "With respect, Father, I think you're wrong. During our connection, I experienced her memories and her thoughts. I saw the way humans solve problems, not through force or rigid order, but through creativity and cooperation. I saw her world, Father. It's beautiful in its chaos. The king's crystalline features hardened. Chaos is weakness. Daughter, order, is strength. This is the foundation upon which our empire was built. But what if it doesn't have to be?" Princess Lyrale moved closer to her father, her voice passionate but respectful. "What if we could combine our order with their creativity? What if we could learn from other species instead of just ruling over them?" King Vorthik turned away from his daughter, looking out at his empire spread beneath the palace. Millions of crystal cities stretched to the horizon, each one perfectly planned and perfectly controlled. This was his legacy, his life's work. And now his own daughter was suggesting it might not be the best way. "There are forces at work here that you don't understand, Lyrale," he said finally. "The noble houses of our empire expect certain things. They expect the royal bloodline to remain pure, to maintain the traditions that have kept us strong for millennia." "The noble houses?" Princess Lyrale's voice showed surprise. "Father, surely you're not going to let politics interfere with honoring your word?" The king was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned back to face his daughter. "There are already whispers in the court, Lyrale. Some of the nobles are saying that your connection with the human has contaminated you, that you're no longer fit to be heir to the throne." Princess Lyrale's eyes flashed with anger, but also with something else, power. The dimensional energies she had absorbed during her cure had awakened abilities that even she didn't fully understand yet. "Let them whisper," she said, and as she spoke, the very air around her began to shimmer. "I am stronger now than I have ever been. The experience with Elena didn't weaken me. It made me more than I was before." King Vorthik stared at his daughter. In amazement, he could feel the energy radiating from her, power that was both Zephyrian and something else entirely. For the first time, he began to wonder if his fear of change had blinded him to new possibilities. But before he could respond, his chief advisor, Lord Cryptus, entered the chamber without waiting for permission. The old noble's silver skin was practically glowing with excitement. "Your Majesty," Cryptus said, barely glancing at the princess, "I bring urgent news from the Noble Council. We have found a solution to your difficulty with the human doctor." King Vorthik frowned. "What kind of solution?" "The agreement you made was witnessed only by the humans and yourself," Cryptus explained with obvious satisfaction. "No official record was made according to Zephyrian law. Technically, the bargain is not legally binding. You could simply order the humans to leave and keep the doctor as a research subject. Princess Lyrale stepped forward, her power crackling around her like lightning. Father, you wouldn't. But Lord Cryptus continued as if she hadn't spoken. Furthermore, the princess's connection with the human could be seen as a form of mental contamination. We could declare her temporarily unfit to rule and place her in protective custody until the effects wear off. The room fell completely silent. King Vorthik looked at his advisor, then at his daughter, then back at his advisor. For a moment, Elena's future, and perhaps the future of humans' Ephrian relations, hung in the balance. Lord Cryptus, the king said slowly, you forget yourself. You suggest that I break my word and imprison my own daughter. Do you think so little of Zephyrian honor? The advisor looked confused. But your majesty, the purity of the royal line, King Vorthik interrupted, has survived for millennia because we have always honored our commitments, even when they were difficult. He looked at his daughter, seeing the strength and determination in her eyes, and perhaps it's time for our line to grow stronger through new experiences, rather than weaker through isolation. Lord Cryptus's expression showed shock and anger. Your Majesty, the noble council will not stand for this. There will be consequences. King Vorthik drew himself up to his full height, every inch the powerful ruler he had always been. Then let there be consequences. I am still king of this empire, and my word is law. Princess Lyrale moved to stand beside her father, her newfound power making her seem almost as tall and imposing as he was. And I am still heir to this throne. Any who challenge that will find that I am no longer the weak, sickly princess they once knew. Lord Cryptus looked between father and daughter, realized he was outnumbered, and backed toward the door. This is not over, he said, his voice filled with threat. The noble houses will not accept a human in the royal family. There will be resistance. After the advisor left, King Vorthik and Princess Lyrale stood together in silence for several minutes. Finally, the king spoke. You know this won't be easy, daughter. There will be those who try to stop this union, who will see it as a threat to everything our civilization stands for. Princess Lyrale nodded. I know, father. But I also know that Elena and I together are stronger than either of us alone. And maybe that's exactly what our empire needs. King Vorthik looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw not the sick, helpless princess she had been, but a strong, confident leader who had grown beyond his expectations. Perhaps, he thought, it was time for him to grow beyond his own expectations as well. Very well, he said finally, I will honor my agreement, but we must be prepared for the challenges ahead. Princess Lyrale smiled, the same warm smile that had reminded him of her mother. Elena taught me something, father. She said that sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to change your perspective on what the problem really is. As dawn approached over the Crystal Palace, both father and daughter knew that their world was about to change forever. The only question was whether that change would bring growth and strength, or chaos and destruction. In her quarters across the palace, Elena was awake too, staring out at the alien sunrise and wondering what the future held. She had saved Princess Lyrale's life, but in doing so, she had set in motion events that would shake the foundation of an entire empire. And somewhere in her heart, she knew that the biggest challenges were still ahead. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just Elena's fate, but the future relationship between humans and the most powerful empire in the galaxy. And at the center of it all was a love that had grown from the most unlikely circumstances, strong enough to bridge the gap between worlds. The confrontation came sooner than anyone expected. 3 days after Princess Lyrale's cure, Elena was summoned to the great throne room. But this time, the vast space was filled with hundreds of Zephyrian nobles, their crystalline forms glittering like living jewels under the palace lights. The air buzzed with tension and whispered conversations. Elena walked down the long aisle between the assembled nobles, feeling their eyes on her like physical weight. Some looked curious, others dismissive, but many looked openly hostile. She could hear fragments of their conversations, words like contamination, primitive, and unworthy floating through the air. At the front of the room, King Vorthik sat on his throne with Princess Lyrale standing beside him. Elena was relieved to see that the princess looked strong and healthy, her skin glowing with power, but she could also see the worry in Lyrale's eyes. Lord Cryptus stood in the center of the room, clearly the spokesman for the assembled nobles. When Elena reached the front, he began to speak in a voice that carried to every corner of the vast chamber. "Noble lords and ladies of Zephyria," he announced, "we are gathered here to address a crisis that threatens the very foundation of our empire." Our king, in a moment of unusual generosity, made an agreement with this human. But we must ask ourselves, is this agreement in the best interest of our people? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Elena felt her heart start to beat faster, but she forced herself to stand straight and calm. Lord Cryptus continued, "For thousands of years, our empire has remained strong because of our purity, our order, our superiority over lesser species. Now we are being asked to welcome a human, a creature from a primitive world, into our royal family. This is not just unacceptable, it is dangerous." Dangerous to whom? The voice that spoke up belonged to Princess Lyrale, and it rang with new authority. Dangerous to our empire, or dangerous to your comfortable assumptions about your own superiority? The nobles stirred uneasily. Many of them had never heard the princess speak with such confidence before. Lord Cryptus turned to face her. "Your Highness, with respect, your recent experience may have affected your judgment. The connection with this human may have influenced your thinking in ways you don't understand." Princess Lyrale stepped forward, and as she did, the air around her began to shimmer with dimensional energy. "My thinking is clearer now than it has ever been, Lord Cryptus. For 2 years, I watched our empire from outside, seeing things you've never bothered to look at. I saw worlds full of suffering that we could help, but don't. I saw species with knowledge and creativity that could strengthen us, but we ignore them because we think we're too good to learn." Elena watched in amazement as Princess Lyrale spoke. The shy, sick young woman she had first met was gone, replaced by someone who radiated confidence and power. But Lord Cryptus wasn't finished, even if we were to overlook the irregularities of this situation. There remains the question of what this human truly wants. She claims to love our princess, but how can we be sure this isn't simply an elaborate plan to infiltrate our empire? How do we know she's not a spy sent to weaken us from within? The accusation hit Elena like a physical blow. She had been prepared for many things, but not for her motives to be questioned so directly. "Because," Elena said, her voice carrying clearly through the throne room, "I could have let your princess die." The room fell silent. Elena took a step forward, addressing not just Lord Cryptus, but the entire assembly. "I came here to save lives on my world. I could have negotiated for the medicine we needed and left without getting involved in your problems. I could have tried to treat Princess Lyrale with conventional methods that would have failed, and then returned home with a clear conscience, knowing I had tried." Elena's voice grew stronger as she continued, "Instead, I risked my own life and sanity to save someone I barely knew. I connected my mind to hers, knowing that if something went wrong, I could have been trapped between dimensions forever. I did this not because I'm a spy, but because I'm a doctor, and because I came to care about a young woman who was suffering." Princess Lyrale moved to stand beside Elena. Taking her hand in front of the entire assembly, Elena didn't just save my life, she said. She showed me what it means to take risks for others, to think beyond yourself and your own people. She taught me that strength doesn't come from isolation, it comes from connection. King Vorthik had been silent throughout the confrontation, but now he stood up from his throne. The entire room turned to look at him, waiting for his judgment. "Lord Cryptus," the king said, his voice echoing through the chamber, "you speak of danger and contamination, but I see something different. I see a human who achieved what our greatest minds could not. I see my daughter, stronger and more capable than she has ever been, and I see an opportunity." The king stepped down from his throne and walked to where Elena and Princess Lyrale stood together. "For too long, our empire has grown through conquest. and domination. We have become strong, but we have also become isolated. We have stopped learning, stopped growing, stopped becoming more than we were. He looked directly at Elena. This human doctor has reminded us that true strength comes not from being better than others, but from learning from them. Lord Cryptus stepped forward, his crystalline features hard with anger. Your Majesty, the noble houses will not accept this. If you insist on this course of action, there will be consequences. King Vorthic's eyes flashed with the power that had made him ruler of the galaxy's greatest empire. Are you threatening your king, Lord Cryptus? The old noble seemed to realize he had gone too far. No, Your Majesty, I am simply stating facts. Then let me state some facts of my own, the king replied. I gave my word to this human doctor, and I will honor it. My daughter has been cured, and the marriage will proceed as agreed. But more than that, I am hereby proposing a new direction for our empire. Instead of simply ruling over other species, we will begin to learn from them. We will form alliances based on mutual benefit rather than conquest. The throne room erupted in shocked voices, some approving, others clearly opposed. But Elena barely heard them. She was looking at Princess Lyrale, seeing the love and gratitude in her eyes, and realizing that somehow, against all odds, everything was going to work out. Princess Lyrale squeezed Elena's hand and spoke to the assembly one final time. My father is right. This marriage isn't just about honoring an agreement. It's about choosing to grow. Rather than stagnate, Elena and I together represent something new, something that could make our empire stronger than it has ever been. As if to emphasize her words, Princess Lyrale raised her free hand, and dimensional energy swirled around her fingers, creating patterns of light that were both beautiful and clearly powerful. This is what I gained.